in a presentation. Okay, folks, find yourself a seat, including you guys up here. Maureen, you gonna sit? Maureen, you gonna sit? Now that you've all found a seat, would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now you can have your seats again. We're going to run the meeting as we always have. I think most of you have been here at least once. I'll go through the warrant in order. I will state the article number and the subject, which cannot be changed, although the warrant can be amended. I will recognize someone for the purposes of making a motion. We will get a second, and then whoever makes the motion will have the first opportunity to speak to it. Once they're done, I will take questions, comments from the audience, anyone who would like to speak. You should have a yellow card in your possession if you are a registered voter, and you will need to show me that in order to do it. When you come to the microphone, I will ask that you clearly state your name and your address so that we can have it for the record. And I'm going to ask you to address me and be polite, be kind. These are your neighbors. You can disagree, but don't be disagreeable. So, starting with that, I'm going to ask the head table here, and Tom, if you would introduce your two tables here.
Very good. Thank you very much, and welcome to the Town of Merrimack's deliberative session. The Town Council, I'll start all the way on my left, your right, is Nancy Murphy, and next to her is Andy Hunter, Lon Woods, and Barbara Healy, myself, Tom Koenig. Finley Rothaus is the vice chair, and Nancy Harrington rounds out the council. And then next to Nancy, and welcome to his first town deliberative session as town manager, Paul McCallie. And next to him is our town attorney, Matt Upton. You always get that
and
missing spot
and
there.
And behind you?
And behind me, on the far right, my right, your left, is Tom Boland, our treasurer, or finance director, excuse me. And all the way on the other side is Diane Trippett, our town clerk tax collector.
And I'm sure we've got all our department heads here, but I'm not going to ask you to recognize them.
Paul can do that job.
Yes. All right, I'm going to proceed with Article 2, which is relative to the wastewater treatment upgrades. Andy, I think you're prepared for this one?
Yes, Madam Moderator, I make a motion to move the article as printed.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Nancy. Andy, you have the floor.
So fortunately, tonight we have someone here that is much more knowledgeable on the wastewater treatment facility, so I'm going to yield my time to Sarita.
Sarita, if you would introduce yourself and also your position.
Thank you, Madam
You got the
Moderator.
mic?
Oh, you want me to go here?
Yep, use this one, please. Gary, they both work?
My name is Sarita Croce. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director for the Town of Merrimack, responsible for the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you.
May I sit down?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Gary, is that other, Bob, that on the mic work? Okay, fine. We're all set, Sarita.
Town councilors, Madam Moderator, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity this evening to present a proposed Phase 5 upgrade for the wastewater treatment plant. Back in 2019, I had the privilege of coming here to discuss the Phase 3 and Phase 4 upgrades. And at that time, I presented a brief overview of the wastewater treatment plant operations. I would like to take an opportunity today to review the operations again, and then review the bid price and the budget associated with the Phase 3, Phase 4 upgrades, which will lead us to a nice conversation about the proposed Phase 5 project recommendations. And then, as always, I'd welcome the opportunity to answer any questions or engage in any discussions on the materials.
So Rita, before you go any further, I want to let people know there is a presentation. She does have it. It's going to be part of the streaming on Merrimack TV. We can't use the screen here, so if you're sitting in the room, you won't be able to see it, but she will describe it. It's also available on the town website. So go ahead, Sarita.
I believe there are also copies of the presentation for people, for the handouts?
Yes, there are.
And I can reference the slides to help everybody with the discussion. So right now, I'm on slide 3, and what you see on the right-hand side of the slide is an overview or a picture of the wastewater treatment plant. Before I get into the operations, I just want to remind everyone that whether you're on septic or you discharge to the sewer system, you are serviced by the wastewater treatment plant. And in fact, when you pump your septic tank, because we have a septic receiving area, you're required to bring, or the vendor who pumps out your septic is required to bring that septic to the Merrimack wastewater treatment plant. We also have an NPDES permit, and that stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And that permit requires us to meet permit limits as well as maintain our infrastructure. We have challenges with flushable wipes. And what I'd like to do, similar to 2019, is I'd like to discuss some of the challenges that we face with the flushable wipes. Now, in 2021, our average flow at the wastewater treatment plant was 1.6 million gallons per day. If you take a look at the drawing, or at the picture, you'll see something labeled preliminary. And preliminary is where all the wastewater enters the wastewater treatment plant. That actually refers to our main pump station. After preliminary treatment, where we remove the big stuff that comes in, we go to primary clarification. And that's where the stuff like dirt will settle in the clarifier. We remove about 50% of the particulate matter in the primary clarifiers. Then the wastewater is pumped uphill, and you'll see a little box there, and that's called our aeration basins. So that's where our microorganisms actually eat the organics and also remove some of the nutrients in our wastewater. From there, we need to separate the microorganisms from the wastewater, so we go to secondary clarification. And that after secondary clarification, the water portion of the plant, or the discharge, goes to disinfection. Now, similar to wiping down your counters at home with bleach, we use bleach to disinfect our wastewater, and that kills the bacteria and pathogens. Now, concurrent with the wastewater treatment processes, we also have a biosolids handling side of things. So from the secondary clarifiers and the primary clarifiers, the solids will go to our sludge holding tanks. From the sludge holding tanks, they go to our dewatering facility, and then we make a marketable product in our biosolids handling facility, which is called compost. One thing I want to point out about compost is that the compost revenues eliminates the cost of sludge disposal for the town of Merrimack. I'm now on the 4th slide, and on this slide, we're talking about the loan amount that was approved during the Phase 3, Phase 4 warrant articles, which was $22.62 million. Unfortunately, what happened is when we received the bid came back $8.2 million higher than expected. So we were faced with a situation where we had to decide what we were going to do with the project. And what we elected to do was to execute the major critical components of the project as part of the Phase 3, Phase 4 upgrade. And tonight, I would like to present to you the Phase 5 proposal, which includes also critical components of the project. At this point, we're on slide number, I guess, 6. So what I have on this slide is I have some check marks there, which are the components of the project that we're currently executing as part of, oh, slide 5? Okay, sorry, slide 5. These are the components of the project that we're executing as part of the Phase 3 and Phase 4 upgrade. What you see in red on that slide are the components that we'd like to add to the Phase 5 upgrade. So I have here the new influence screenings building. I have the compost ventilation system upgrade. I have the wash water piping system and renovation to the headworks building. I'm sure everybody remembers that back in 2019, we had the privilege to perform a slight demonstration. And what we did back in 2019 is we brought 2 jars, and one of the jars we put a flushable wipe, and in the other jar, we put toilet paper. We shook both jars, and the toilet paper pretty much disintegrated very quickly, but the flushable wipe remained intact. So what I have here for you today that I will pass around is the same 2 jars, and I just want to point out the flushable wipe is still intact. So that brings us to what the problem is. The problem with the flushable wipes are that they don't disintegrate in the piping system. They clog our pumps, they clog our pipes, they wreak general havoc. And if you look on the right side of the slide, you'll see 2 pictures, and those are 2 operators at the wastewater treatment plant who are physically shoveling out the flushable wipes out of our sludge holding tank. That's arguably the worst job at the wastewater treatment plant. These individuals are exposed to toxic gases, and they are exposed to other hazards as they're shoveling the stuff out of the tank itself. In the year 2022 and the year 2019, we had the technology to not have to do this anymore. And that technology is an influence screenings building. And what you end up having is you have a climber screen that removes these flushable wipes and other large materials from the wastewater before it has a chance to go anywhere else. As I had discussed earlier, I talked about the compost facility and the revenues that eliminate the cost of disposal of sludge. Well, in order to take advantage of that, we need to continue to maintain that facility, and the ventilation system in that facility is of vital importance. The wash water piping system was not something I actually spoke about very much back in 2019. So the wash water piping system and the wash water system is a part of our efforts at the wastewater treatment plant to maintain lower costs. So we use approximately 350,000 gallons a day of water in our process operations. And what we do is we recycle the water that we've cleaned as part of the wastewater treatment plant operations back through the facility. Now, if I were to pay Penachuk for that daily water usage, it would be about $1,870 a day, and that would add up to about $680,000 a year. So the wash water piping system is about keeping our costs, our operating costs, down. Renovation to the headworks building is the next component we'd like to add back in. As I had said in 2019, we are not ADA compliant. The men's locker room and bathrooms are all circa 1970. We've never changed or upgraded any of the infrastructure or any of the fixtures in those bathrooms. The lab upgrade, what we'd like to do is we'd like to bring the lab into compliance with current codes, and we'd also like to help ensure by bringing the lab into compliance with current codes that we can maintain our national certifications. So we perform analyses every single day in our laboratory to maintain compliance with our EPA permit. And one other note I wanted to mention was that there is no women's locker room at the wastewater treatment plant. So now I'm on slide 6. And so the big thing that we want to talk about is how much is this all going to cost? Well, the estimated cost is $10.1 million. So now the real question is, why should we do this now? Why is it important to try and execute this project now? Well, all of us are here are facing the challenges associated with inflation. Things are costing more at the supermarkets. Gas costs more. Some of the shelves at the supermarkets are empty because there are supply chain issues. Well, we face those same issues on this project. And I want you to take a look at the screenings building for a second. So the estimated cost for the screenings building on this slide is $3.2 million. Back in July of 2021, we asked our contractor to give us an estimated cost to actually build that building, and that was $2.7 million. So in the last 8 months, that cost has been increased by $500,000, and we do not see this trend changing. The next thing I would like to point to is the washwater piping. So the estimated cost for the washwater piping is $585,000. Now, if you remember in the previous slide, I had mentioned that we spend, if we were to pay Pennachuck for that water, we would spend about $680,000. So we can see here that if we repair the piping and we upgrade the piping, it's less than a 1-year return on investment. Now, in December of 2021, we actually had an issue with the piping, and we had a break, and we had to do an emergency repair. Now, for a moment, I'd like you to think about some of the issues we're facing. If we did not upgrade that piping and we had catastrophic failure of the piping, we would not only have to pay the $585,000 to repair it, but we would also have to pay for the water from Pennachuck while we're waiting for the repair. And with the supply chain issues, what we're finding is what used to take several years ago, maybe in 2018 or 15, 3 months or 2 months to get, we're waiting 6 months to get that same equipment. I'm now on slide 7, and slide 7 talks about the American Rescue Plan Act. So back last year, the town was able to receive money from the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed by Congress. Well, not only did the town receive money, but the state of New Hampshire also received money. So the state of New Hampshire, with that funding, was required to use it for the Clean Water Program. So the Clean Water Program includes both wastewater treatment plants and water treatment plants, or drinking water plants. So the state of New Hampshire requested communities in the state to submit an application to qualify for this ARPA grant. What the town of Merrimack submitted was presented on the previous slide, and we have been pre-approved by New Hampshire DES for a 20% ARPA grant up to $2 million. So now that $10.2 million that you saw on the last slide, the net loan, if we were to accept the grant, would be $8.1 million. This slide, which is slide 8, provides an estimate debt repayment schedule for the $8.1 million, and it's based on a 20-year loan at 2.5% interest. So now the next thing that's really important to talk about is how do we pay for this? None of the money to pay for this loan comes from the tax base. None of the money to pay for this loan comes from the tax base. So where does it come from? Well, we get revenue from a number of different sources at the wastewater treatment plant. One source of revenue are the residential ratepayers. A second source of revenue is commercial and industrial dischargers. Now, the commercial and industrial dischargers, which includes apartment complexes, actually pay for greater than 50% or account for greater than 50% of the revenues that we receive at the wastewater treatment plant. As I had talked about septage, well, I actually probably didn't talk about it, but we receive septage from the town of Merrimack, and we also receive septage from 8 other communities in New Hampshire. So we receive revenue from that. We receive revenues from receiving sludge from 8 communities in the state of New Hampshire, and we also receive revenue from compost sales. Now, at the bottom of that slide, I have a bar graph, and on that bar graph, you see 85 communities in New Hampshire. And what the intent of that bar graph was, to show or to evaluate how our rate fits in with the rest of the state of New Hampshire. And when we looked at our rate back in 2018, we saw that we were the 5th lowest rate, and that was $242 a year. As we project out our rate in 2026, it will be $357 a year, and that will be the 13th lowest rate. Now, that assumes that none of these other communities in the state of New Hampshire will increase their rate. And I just want to point out that the highest rate on that bar graph is $1,600 a year, and the median rate is $500 or $590 a year. And finally, I want to point out, as this is my last slide, and emphasize to everyone that we do not use the tax base to pay for the debt repayment on those loans. It comes from the revenues that I have shown above.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Would anyone like to speak to, for, against, comments, anything on this article? Come on ahead. Remember, introduce yourself, please.
Madam Chairman, my name is John Sauter. I live at 9 Elizabeth Drive. I'm asking about the 2.5% assumption on the loan repayment schedule. I pay more than that now for my home equity loan, and it's going up again this month. Yep. Probably go up a whole % by the end of the year. So I wonder if this 2.5% is reasonable.
Paul?
Yes, we receive quotes from what we call a state revolving fund grant. It's a lot cheaper than what we can get on the open market for a bond. And they actually have said that 2.5 would be a very good number for us to utilize, and it's a reasonable number. They set the rates based on money they have, repayments of other state revolving fund loans, things of that sort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with comments, questions, jokes? Seeing none, the article will move to the ballot as printed, and I will remind you that you are going to need 60% to pass this one because it's a bond article. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita.
And I want to interrupt just a minute here before I go on to 3. I was negligent in my opening remarks. I would like to welcome Mark DeFranzo to the town. Mark, if you would stand up just so people know what you look like. Welcome to Merrimack. We're glad to have you. Article 3, relative to the drainage and road repairs to Woodland Drive area. Mr. Bloom?
I'm Harvey Bloom, 3 Evergreen Drive. This particular article is, shall I read it?
Mr. Bloom, you're going to make a motion first, please?
Yes, I move that we accept Article 3. Shall I read the whole petition?
You can move the article as printed.
I move the article as printed.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Bloom, thank you very much. Okay, now speak to it.
Okay. Basically, the tree streets, as I call them, since we've been living in Merrimack for some 40-something years, have been paved and repaved, but not really secure. And there's holes, potholes, drainage issues that we have through the area. So we went by petition and talked to a number of the neighbors, and they were pretty much in favor. We got 43 approved signatures that say they want the roads to be relooked at, prioritized, and redone. To support that, we came up with this $3 million budget that would start the process under the control of Kyle, our maintenance people, to determine what the priorities are road to road. So that's the gist of it. I have lots of pictures if anybody wants to see what the roads look like. Some of the areas, for example, by one of our neighbors we call Lake Whitaker. The Whitakers have since left town decades ago, but the lake is still there. And that's a ponding, basically, because of the poor drainage.
You might be able to get Merrimack TV to take some of those pictures and display them when they're doing some of the other things there, so that would help.
Pardon?
I said you might be able to give some of those pictures to Merrimack TV.
Oh, yes,
We
right.
have 2 of them, and they would...
We actually had that mounted on the computer, so that's probably there.
That
I have a thumb drive also that I can provide
I would talk to
those.
them. You got one in the back there, one over there, and connect up with them, and that would help, I believe. So,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Right on, thank you.
Anyone else with questions, comments, suggestions? Tom?
I'm going to ask Kyle if he could come and give us some idea of the $3 million budget and what that would accomplish, what we think it will accomplish.
Good evening, Madam Moderator, Town Council, residents of Merrimack. So the $3 million estimate that has been presented in the petition warrant article will probably not complete all of the work that's necessary in the roads that has been presented in the petition warrant article. But it would certainly be a great start. We certainly know that those roads are a big need for the town and for public works. And many of the roads haven't been paved for many years, even though they're near the bottom of our pavement condition index list. And the reason we haven't paved them is because of the need for drainage. And it would just be spending bad money after bad money to pave over terrible roads and not fix the drainage. I guess that sums it up quickly.
Thank you, Kyle.
But there's still engineering work that has to be done to figure out the drainage, right?
There is, yeah. So the project is a complicated project. The area is very flat, as anyone who's driven through Woodland Park knows. Our biggest challenge will be trying to find a location to dump the collected stormwater to, given that the town really doesn't own any land in the immediate area. And being so flat, there's no vertical relief to be able to discharge the stormwater. So that'll be our biggest challenge. So the first steps, if the bond were to pass, we'd do a combination of working with a consultant to perform some detailed survey, partially using our GIS, and using our town engineer to design portions of the project. And I should mention that our town engineer, Dawn Tuamala, is here, and her and the summer interns have done a number of survey of parts of this area as we've had plans to do this project in our CIP, and we've been making preparations for it. We don't have the money for the full project budgeted. So it's definitely a project of need, and we'd love to participate in it if the voters choose to accept it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, the article will move forward to the ballot as printed. We're going to go on to Article number 4, which is the operating budget. Tom, I believe, motion?
Madam Moderator, I move Article 4 as printed.
Finley, your second? Thank you. All right, Tom, you have the floor.
Thank you. The municipal budget shows an increase of about $1.7 million over last year. So I want to take a moment to just highlight some of the increases and decreases. There's a line in there for $827,000 plus or minus for communications equipment, which the majority of it, $800,000, is for police and fire emergency services communication, and $27,000 for DPW. And then another line for staffing for 8 additional firefighters. This amount is offset by a grant, but it has to be in our budget. So there's $853,000 in there for the 8 additional firefighters, offset by the SAFER grant. Those two combined add up to the $1.6+ million increase in the town budget. So the rest of these changes, plus and minus, balance out to an even change. So I would just want to go through some of them just to give you an idea of where we're at. Union wages, including steps and benefits approved in prior years, adds about $231,000 this year. Non-union wages at 2.5% that the council approved, the increase is about $124,000. New positions in the budget, an equipment operator and a dispatcher, both that are very critically needed in the highway department and in the police communications, the emergency services communications, are both a little over $79,000 when you take in the fully weighted wages, benefits, and all those things. A change in the town clerk, tax collector's office from a part-time clerk to a full-time clerk adds about $40,000 to the budget. But then we have a reduction because there's only 52 payroll weeks this year instead of 53. And each week costs about $278,000 to do payroll. So because this is one of, I mean, I guess every 5 or 6 years we get to pull back a week, or we don't have to do most of the time we don't have to do the 53rd week, but every 5 or 6 years we have to add that in, and that was last year. Additionally, kind of unusual, health insurance decreased this year by about $137,000. So those almost balance out by themselves. Then we look at other smaller things, maintenance of office equipment. Basically, the service contract for the communication upgrade is $52,000. Sand and salt is more expensive. We went from $50 a ton to $72.60 a ton for salt, and from $9 a ton to $15 a ton for sand. So about $61,000 is budgeted for that. But in our overall budget, we've got about an $80,000 decrease in our infrastructure cost. Vehicle fuel, you know what that's doing. We're probably under budgeted by increasing it $20,000. Elections, there's 3 elections this year instead of 1. That adds about $18,000 to the budget. Legal services, utilities adds another $45,000. Solid waste tipping fees. Our tipping fees for solid waste keep going up on us. We had a contract that went for about 5 years that our previous town manager was able to negotiate, where we had $1 a year increase in those fees. As that contract went out and the people realized they were losing money taking our waste, they bumped that rate quite a bit. So our solid waste disposal, just to tip this stuff at the transfer station out of town, went from $75 to $82 a ton. And we saved a little bit more on recycling. That went down by about $10 or $15 a ton, so that the net increase is about $38,000. And then the final change, the debt reduction in our wastewater plant, because of bonds being paid off or not being renewed yet, is about $275,000. So when you look at it, this budget, except for those 2 major items for communications, which allows our firefighters to be able to communicate outside of buildings when they're inside there, so that they're not in a dead zone when they go into a building to deal with it, or lets the police communicate more thoroughly around town, and with I think it's an 800 megahertz system that we're getting put in, piggybacking off Nashua. That cost, plus the additional firefighters, is the lion's share of the increase in the budget this year. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
Questions, comments, suggestions? Go ahead.
My name is John Sauter. I live at 9 Elizabeth Drive. I move to add $100,000 to the IT budget.
Do we have a second? Thank you. John, you want to speak to that?
Madam Moderator, I was a member of the Computer Committee, which recommended the town government use computers to improve its efficiency. We've done that with good results, but the Computer Committee did not foresee today's ransomware environment, where extortionists look for weaknesses in our computer systems and take advantage of them to lock up our computers until we pay their demands. Extortionists like Conti take in $180 million a year, targeting big organizations, expecting each to pay $10 million to get their computers back. However, the big organizations are defending themselves better, so these extortionists will soon start looking for smaller organizations, even though they probably won't be able to extort more than $1 or $2 million from each. As they look around for the lowest hanging fruit on the ransomware tree, what will they see? Nashua has a budget of about $200 million, about 5 times ours, 13 people on its IT department, about 7 times ours, and its IT budget is $3 million, 30 times ours. Maybe Nashua isn't a good comparison because they're so much bigger than we are, so consider Hudson. Their budget is about the same as ours. Their IT department has 4 people, about twice ours, but their IT budget is $750,000, more than 7 times ours. As the extortionists look around, they will see us as the most tempting combination of ability to pay an underfunded IT department. I am sure we have insurance, but insurance companies have a clever trick to avoid paying claims. As a condition of insurance, we have to agree to follow industry best practices. They don't check on us until we file a claim. Then they check. And if we aren't doing everything they think we should, they won't pay. A good source of industry best practices is a report released recently by the National Security Agency called Network Infrastructure Security Guidance. Following its advice would be expensive, but we must improve our IT before an extortionist locks up our computers and demands payment to release them. I am not asking for our IT budget to be as large as Hudson's. It takes time to learn how to spend large amounts of money wisely. Instead, I am asking only for an additional $100,000. That will let us make some simple and inexpensive improvements and let us develop a long-term plan to improve our IT security following the NSA's recommendations as best we can. Based on that plan, we can have a more realistic budget for IT in the years to come.
Thank you, sir. I want to clarify one thing, first of all. If this amendment passes, and we will be voting on it tonight, what we are doing is changing the bottom line on the budget only. We're not changing any line items at all, because we're not allowed to do that. We can add the $100,000 to the bottom line of the budget, and then it would be up to the town council in the following year to spend that money or not as they deem wise. Okay?
Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you. All right, Paul?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I want to thank you for bringing this request forward. However, I want to assure the people of Merrimack, the residents of Merrimack, that our IT department is secure. We do have ransomware. We do pay a private company for our ransomware. We have a contract. We started this, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago after I went to a conference and they started talking about ransomware and some of the smaller towns being hit and held hostage. We came back and we worked to get a contract with a third-party provider to help us secure our ransomware. In addition, we have sought out grants through the state of New Hampshire for help with our IT and our IT structure to make sure that we are secure. As a matter of fact, we're in the process of applying for a grant right now through the state that's at no cost to us that will check our emails in our wastewater department and our red flags. So we are doing a lot that we can do with our department. Yes, we do have 2 full-time employees that sit in our IT department. We have a gentleman who is the coordinator of our IT department who comes from private industry. He has put a lot of checks and balances in for this ransomware. We talk about it all the time. We are very concerned about it, but we are covered as a town for ransomware, and it is included in the current budget, this contract, to move forward for the next few years. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak to this? Chris? You need to yield the mic.
Chris Christensen, 27 Great Stone Drive. I have a question on the budget itself, and that is, are there increases within the proposed budget in the IT department for whatever purposes this year compared to last year?
Tom is looking.
Thank you for the question. We'll get you an answer in a second. I believe that a lot of the equipment that would be purchased for the ransomware would come out of a capital reserve fund that we have money set aside for. Besides salaries, I do not believe that we have increased the budget in IT. Like I said, we have a new IT director, and he's getting his feet wet, and he's bringing together a proposal for additional resources for items such as servers and things of that sort. And our gateways into the building, that's what we're looking at upgrading, which we do have money set aside for in capital reserve funds.
Follow-up?
Go ahead.
Am I correct that the proposals for this year's voting includes an increase to the capital reserve fund for computer equipment?
It's the same as last year.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions, comments, suggestions? Seeing none, what we have on the floor right now is an amendment to the original motion for the operating budget, and it is to increase the operating budget by $100,000. Again, we are increasing the bottom line on the budget. I'm going to ask for those of you that have a yellow card, if you are in favor of not the budget, but this amendment to the budget, raise your yellow card. Well, you got a few. Those of you who are opposed to this amendment, raise your yellow card. The amendment fails. So we are going to go back to the original motion as printed in the warrant. Any further questions, suggestions, or comments? Seeing none, the original motion will move forward to the ballot as printed. We're going on to Article 5, relative to capital reserves and expendable trust funds. Nancy?
I move that this motion move forward as printed.
Thank you. And we have a second from Barb. Thank you. Go ahead, Nancy.
Just a couple of words about this. Article 5 maintains the long-established deposits to the capital reserve funds, better known as our savings accounts. These were established in order to avoid bonding for major issues regarding equipment or various projects within the departments within the town. This past year, we've used capital reserve funds to be able to pay cash. Again, no interest because we didn't have to bond it. 2 fire trucks, a DPW truck, and other various transfer station equipment. So hopefully that helps explain why there is a need. And this is not, again, new. This is just a continuation of the savings account, and by law, by regulation, it has to be separated out from the budget. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions, suggestions? Tom?
I just would like to add that these numbers here are numbers that generally we're using annually, and they're driven by what we call the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, which looks out 6 years to figure out what we need to be doing. And with that program, we're defining the trucks we need for DPW for plowing or sanding. We're defining the equipment we need throughout the town, fire trucks and things of that nature, and estimating their lifespan and when we need to replace them. So it's a savings account to be able to replace those when they come up, rather than having to come up with the full $1 million for a fire truck or something at one point. We can put in a certain amount, and we drive that with the CIP.
Any further comments? Seeing none, Article 5 will move to the ballot as printed. We're going on to Article 6, relative to the Sewer Infrastructure Capital Reserve Fund. Barb, I believe?
Yes, Madam Moderator, I move to have the article to the ballot as printed. Yeah.
As printed, yes, thank you. And a second from Nancy?
Andy.
Nancy Murphy.
From Andy, okay, thank you.
Okay, well, you just got the explanation of what the capital reserve funds are. This particular one is just as it relates to the wastewater treatment plant, and that will be just to be in that savings account for when any capital expenditures are needed to fix things or replace things. So that's
Thank
it.
you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, Article 6 will move to the ballot as printed. We're going on to Article 7, which is the collective bargaining agreement between Merrimack Town Council and the Teamsters Local 633. Lon, I believe you're on this.
Madam Moderator, I move Article 7 as printed.
Thank you. And Nancy, we have a second? Thank you. Lon, you have the floor.
Yes, just to reiterate, in the warrant guide, the town meeting guide, on page 17, just to highlight, the duration of the contract being recommended is 2 years from July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2024. The wages in the first year are 2.5%. In the second year are 3%. And in addition, all union members will receive an increase to their base hourly rate of 48 cents per hour for the first full pay period upon the inception of the contract. There's a change in the benefit for spouse increased life insurance from $1,000 to $10,000, and the children benefit increased from $500 to $5,000. Certain employees find themselves on call at times during holidays. Those employees will be paid an extra 2 hours at just 1 times their base hourly rate for each observed holiday that the employee is required to be on call. And finally, there will be an allowance of up to $125 for certain employees for approved prescription safety glasses once every 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? Shannon?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Shannon Barnes, 55 Lawrence Road, and I just wanted to get clarity. If you could just let me know the roles and responsibilities in the departments that hold the Teamsters Local 633.
Paul?
Those are our DPW supervisors, so and foreman and secretary. They are wastewater, solid waste, in the highway division.
Okay, and for wastewater, are they paid through taxpayer or are they paid through user?
Pays through user fees.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else with comments or questions? Seeing none, Article 7 will move to the ballot as printed. And we're down to Article 8 with a proposed amendment to Charter Article 6-2A. Nancy?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I move Article 8 is printed.
Thank you.
On page...
And we have a second. Lon, thank you.
On page 18 of the town meeting guide, there's a brief explanation of the rationale for this proposal, which the town council supports. It's fairly self-explanatory. In addition to allowing the board the ability to meet and function in the event of an absence of an elected member, having the option for alternates could also, I think, provide people maybe the experience they need to consider becoming a future candidate for election to the board, as well as maintain some long-term institutional knowledge of the board and its work. Voting in favor of this charter amendment would not impact the tax rate.
Thank you. Anyone else with comments or questions? Shannon?
Shannon Barnes, 55 Lawrence Road, and I just wanted to speak in support of this. I just wanted to take a moment because we're in a room where the trustees of the trust funds did great work. This is a community gem, this room. It's where we have our elections. It's where we have our deliberative sessions. It's where we have a lot of community events. We're standing on a floor and sitting in bleachers that were provided to us by the trustees of the trust funds. And we cannot thank them enough for coming forward, at least for the school district funds that they manage, and giving us this opportunity to make ADA compliant bleachers for our community to sit in as they come to events, and for a floor that is just stunning. The only thing I'm so sorry about is Jack Balcom never got to see it. I think it's a wonderful idea to have an alternate. Unfortunately, we hope this doesn't become a habit, obviously, having to lose a good member of our community who loves to serve us. But with that, always having that continuity and that odd number for voting so that we can move all of our big projects like this forward without any interruption. So I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'm glad it's, part of our deliberative session.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, it will move to the warrant as printed. Cindy, are you heading to the mic to speak? Okay, we'll hold off moving it.
I just wanted to address, Madam Moderator, thank you. Last night was Lynn Christensen's last night moderating for the school district deliberative session. She has tirelessly served our community for years and decades, and I just really wanted to thank you for all that you do for the community, and we're going to miss you moderating the school district sessions.
Thank you. And along that line, if you see the gentleman standing just to my right.
Could I have a moment? I wanted just to, also last night was the last night that two school board members will be serving, and I think it's appropriate to acknowledge them. Both Cinda and Shannon Barnes served their last meeting of the school board deliberative session, and so we thank you for your service to the town, and we wish you the best moving forward.
And a familiar face that you will have seen at many, many, many of my meetings, as well as the elections. Brian McCarthy, to my right here, has filed to take on the moderator's position in the school board. I've still filed for town, so you're stuck with me, but Brian is going to take over the school, hopefully if you elect him. Thank you very much. And with that, I will...
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I didn't have a chance, but we will take that motion. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate your attendance.
52 minutes.